I want to begin with a confession. What people call awakening is not a gentle sunrise. It is more like being shaken awake in the middle of the night, heart racing, unsure where you are. If you came here seeking calm reassurance, you may be disappointed, but if you came seeking truth, then stay with me. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to really consider it before answering. Have you ever felt that the more aware you became, the less comfortable life seemed? If so, tell me in the comments below. I read them, and they matter, because this confusion is far more common than we admit. You see, we have wrapped the idea of awakening in a rather charming illusion. We imagine it as permanent bliss, as smiling serenity, as walking through the world untouched by fear or doubt. This fantasy sells very well. It comforts the ego, but it is not how awakening actually works. Awakening is not peaceful because peace, as most people define it, depends on sleep. It depends on not seeing too much. The first shock of awakening is the collapse of certainty. You suddenly realize that many of the things you believed were solid. Your identity, your ambitions, your moral certainties are not solid at all. They are habits of thought, repeated so often they feel like facts. And when those habits begin to dissolve, the mind panics. That panic is not a failure of awakening. It is proof that something real is happening. Most people spend their lives trying to arrange the world so they can feel secure. They want guaranteed outcomes, fixed meanings, and clear labels. Awakening strips this away. It shows you quite mercilessly that life is uncertain by nature. No belief system, no philosophy, no spiritual practice can remove that uncertainty. To awaken is to see that security was always an illusion. This is why awakening often feels like loss. You lose the comforting story of who you thought you were. You lose the idea that someone is in control. You lose the sense that life owes you clarity. And the mind protests, saying, "This was not what I signed up for." Of course it wasn't. The ego never signs up for its own disappearance. There is another uncomfortable truth here. Awakening does not make you special. It does not elevate you above others. In fact, it often does the opposite. It reveals how deeply human you are, how vulnerable, how entangled in the same fears and desires as everyone else. The fantasy of becoming spiritually superior is one of the first things that must burn away, and that burning can feel humiliating. People often tell me they feel more anxious after becoming more conscious. I say, of course you do. You are noticing what was always there. The anxiety did not appear because you awakened. It appeared because you stopped ignoring it. Awakening removes the anesthesia. You feel life more sharply, joy, yes, but also grief, confusion, and dread. And here is the great misunderstanding. People think awakening should remove pain. But pain is part of being alive. What awakening removes is the false belief that pain means something has gone wrong. When you stop resisting pain, it changes its character. It no longer defines you. But before that happens, you must feel it fully, without escape. This is why so many people abandon the path. They say, "This is too heavy. This is not making me happier." And they are right, if by happiness they mean constant comfort. Awakening is not about feeling good. It is about being real. And reality is wild, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifying. Let me be very clear. Awakening does not destroy the self. It reveals that the self was never what you thought it was. The idea of a separate me controlling life begins to loosen. At first, this feels like losing ground beneath your feet. The mind wants something to hold on to, but there is nothing to grasp. This is where fear arises, and that fear is honest. Society does not prepare you for this. We train people to function, to succeed, to perform roles. We do not train them to question the very structure of their identity. So when awakening begins, you may feel isolated, as though no one understands what you are going through. That loneliness is not a sign of failure. It is a natural consequence of seeing beyond shared illusions. Here is the paradox that few are willing to face. The chaos you feel is not created by awakening, it is revealed by it. The mind was already restless, already insecure, already afraid. Awakening simply turns the lights on. And when you turn the lights on in a cluttered room, it looks worse before it looks better. If you are still listening, I invite you to stay curious rather than judgmental toward your experience. Do not rush to label it as progress or regression. Do not demand peace as a reward. Instead, notice what is being shown to you. Awakening is not a destination, it is a process of unlearning. In the next part, I will speak about why surrender, not control, is what transforms this discomfort into freedom, and why resisting the process only deepens the suffering. But for now, sit with this question. If awakening is not meant to make you comfortable, what might it actually be asking of you? Let us go further, because this is where most people turn back. Once the shock has arrived, once the old certainties have cracked, the mind immediately asks, "What do I do now?" And this question, innocent as it sounds, is the very thing that keeps the struggle alive. The reflex to control is deeply ingrained. From childhood, we are taught that if something feels uncomfortable, we must fix it, manage it, or escape it. So when awakening brings confusion, fear, or emptiness, the mind rushes in with techniques, affirmations, identities, and spiritual costumes. But awakening does not ask you to improve yourself. It asks you to stop pretending you know who you are. This is why surrender is so misunderstood. People imagine surrender as passivity, weakness, or giving up on life. But surrender, as I mean it, is the willingness to experience reality without demanding it be different. It is the courage to feel uncertainty without immediately reaching for an answer. That takes far more strength than control ever did. You see, control is based on fear. It assumes that if you do not manage life, something terrible will happen. But awakening reveals a startling truth. Life is happening anyway. You are not steering the universe. You are not even steering your own thoughts as much as you think. Once this becomes clear, the effort to control begins to feel exhausting, even absurd. This is where discomfort deepens for many people. They realize how much of their energy has been spent trying to hold themselves together. And when they stop doing that, even briefly, there is a sensation of falling. The mind calls this falling danger, but what is actually falling is the illusion of a separate controller. Now let me say something that may unsettle you further. Awakening does not remove responsibility. It removes the false idea that responsibility means anxiety. When you see that you are part of the whole process of life, action still happens, but it happens more naturally, more intelligently, without the constant background tension of me versus the world. At this stage, many people experience what they call meaninglessness. Old goals no longer motivate them. Social games feel hollow. They may ask, if nothing is solid, then what is the point? This is not nihilism, it is detox. You are withdrawing from borrowed meanings so that something more authentic can emerge. The problem is that the mind hates open space. It wants purpose neatly packaged, so it tries to rush through this phase, to declare understanding too soon. But awakening cannot be rushed. Any conclusion you grasp prematurely becomes another cage, another belief to defend. There is also grief here, real grief. You grieve the life you thought you were building, the person you thought you would become. You grieve the sense of progress measured by society's yardsticks. This grief is not a mistake. It is an honest response to the death of an illusion. And like all grief, it must be allowed, not analyzed away. One of the strangest discoveries is that peace does not come from eliminating inner noise. It comes from no longer fighting it. Thoughts continue. Emotions continue. What changes is your relationship to them. Instead of saying, "This should not be happening," you begin to say, "This too belongs." This is where awakening quietly turns, not into fireworks or ecstasy, but into intimacy with experience. You stop standing outside life, judging it, measuring it, comparing it to an ideal. You begin to participate. And participation is messy. It involves vulnerability. It involves not knowing what comes next. If you are feeling lost right now, I want you to hear this clearly. Being lost is not the opposite of awakening. It is part of it. Only a mind obsessed with maps thinks being lost is failure. Life itself does not move in straight lines. Ask yourself, and feel free to write this in the comments, what if the confusion you are experiencing is not something to escape, but something to listen to? What if it is inviting you to live without the armor you have been wearing? Now we come to the quiet turning point, the one that cannot be forced and cannot be advertised. After the struggle with control, after the exhaustion of seeking, something unexpected begins to dawn. Not excitement, not fireworks, but a subtle recognition that life has been carrying you all along. This is where people misunderstand peace. They imagine peace as the absence of disturbance, but life is movement. It breathes, it changes, it erupts, it dissolves. A peace that depends on stillness is fragile. The peace that awakening reveals is not fragile. It is flexible. It moves with chaos instead of opposing it. You begin to notice that you are not standing outside experience, trying to manage it. You are the experience itself. Thoughts arise, sensations arise, emotions surge and fade, and none of them require a central commander. This realization does not make life smaller. It makes it intimate. Here is the great relief. You no longer need to justify your existence. The constant inner narration, am I doing enough? Am I becoming someone? Starts to lose its urgency. Not because you have answered these questions, but because you see they were never the right questions to begin with. At this stage, compassion changes. It is no longer a moral obligation or a spiritual virtue. It becomes natural. When you see that everyone is struggling with their own illusions of control, their own fear of groundlessness, judgment becomes difficult to maintain. You recognize yourself everywhere. This does not mean you become passive or indifferent. On the contrary, you may act more decisively than ever. But action now arises from clarity rather than anxiety. You respond instead of react. You speak when speech is needed, and you remain silent when silence is truer. And yes, pain still happens, loss still happens, confusion still visits. Awakening does not protect you from these things. What it offers is freedom from the additional suffering created by resistance. You no longer say, "This should not be happening to me." You say, "This is what is happening." This is the peace people rarely talk about because it cannot be sold. It does not inflate the ego. It does not make you feel superior. It humbles you. It shows you that you belong to the same process as the stars, the oceans, and the passing thoughts in your mind. One of the most liberating discoveries is that you do not have to hold yourself together. Life is not a performance you must maintain. When you stop trying to be a finished product, you begin to live as a process, and a process is allowed to change. If you listen closely, you may notice a quiet trust emerging. Not trust in outcomes, not trust in beliefs, but trust in movement itself. You see that uncertainty is not a flaw in existence. It is the very condition that allows creativity, love, and surprise. This is why awakening is not peaceful in the beginning. It dismantles the false peace built on certainty and control. But what replaces it is something far more resilient, a peace that does not depend on life behaving itself. So if you are in the middle of discomfort, confusion, or inner upheaval, I will leave you with this reassurance. Nothing has gone wrong. You are not failing. You are being invited to stop standing apart from life and to step back into it, exactly as it is. And perhaps the most radical realization of all is this: you were never meant to arrive somewhere else. You were always meant to be here, awake, uncertain, alive, and utterly inseparable from the unfolding mystery of existence. If this resonated with you, let me know by sharing your experience below. Your voice is part of this conversation, and remember, awakening is not about escaping life. It is about finally meeting it.